Hello, welcome to Gay2k, a podcast for nostalgic millennial queers. I'm Sarah.
And I'm Alex.
If you're tuning into Gay2k today, you're probably our friends. And if you happened upon it, I think we owe you a bit of an explanation about what we plan to do here. For me, Gay2k started as a way to rediscover things that I loved about gay culture growing up, or reappreciate things that I perhaps didn't appreciate the first time around. And when I was thinking about that and who to do it with, Alex was the first person that came to mind.
Hi,
Uh,
friends. You're friends now.
Without getting into the nitty gritty details, Alex and I recently realized our friendship is of legal drinking age.
And smoking age.
Our friendship is legal. So when you look back on your teen years or earlier than that, and you look back on Y2K, what are some of the biggest pop culture influences for you?
For me, they don't feel as gay, but it's when you put them all together that you kind of get a roadmap of gay. You got Britney Spears and Christina Aguilera. You have, I have, I have those. I have the Backstreet Boys, and that's a lot of pop music. What else? Loving the Moulin Rouge, but not because it was a romance story.
Moulin Rouge, excellent. I mentioned that for me, the greatest impact of any pop culture moment or TV and film was Willow Rosenberg, the collective Willow Rosenberg, and the whole picture together. And then I asked Alex, what's your Willow Rosenberg?
Did I say Jack right away?
I don't know. No, I think what happened is that you paused and you were like, is it Jack? Would it be Jack? And I thought you were talking about, Jack McPhee popped into my head. And then we kind of talked a little bit about Will and Jack. And then I was like, oh, we're talking about that Jack, which led us to this crosshair of examining the two Jacks a little bit more closely.
Our 1998 Jacks. Yeah. So if you're tuning in today, we're going to untangle the two Jacks and identify what they both meant to us and what they eventually did for us.
When looking at these two shows, Will and Grace running for 8 seasons and Dawson's Creek running for 6, there's a lot to cover. The topic that I most wanted to explore was the first kisses on TV, because both of these shows broke new ground in different ways. So we'll take you back to the year 2000. It is February 22nd. Mariah Carey's Thank God I Found You is #1 on the radio. And the NBC sitcom Will and Grace airs the first kiss between two gay male characters. This leads us to talking about Jack McPharland. What is Will and
Grace is for straight people. I knew it right away. I knew it wasn't for me.
Hold on. So Will and Grace is for straight people. What does that mean? I don't think you're wrong. What does that mean?
Well, you were introducing both of those shows, and I can't help but remember that these shows were about heterosexual pairs. You have Will and Grace, a male and a female, and it's about those two and their relationship. Until reading back on those articles, I didn't realize I'd already had in my head that it was a straight couple, but their only problem was that one of them was gay. And their life, every episode, almost, their life would have been better if they could be together, if they could just select each other. And
Right.
How does a pair of friends navigate that relationship when they can't be together, but they still love each other dearly?
Mm-hmm.
And it's sweet, it's sentimental, and I understand why it made so much money. I understand why so many people fell in love with it. I also understood that when I watched it, it wasn't about me. And it didn't mirror any of the heterosexual relationships that I had in my life or wanted to have in my life. Having a hag or having a best friend that relies on you all the time in that specific way wasn't really beautiful or poignant for me. And again, I was a kid. I didn't understand that life was dramatic and life was troubling and life was difficult.
How old were you when Will and Grace? Well, how old were you in 2000 when the first kiss between two gay male characters happened?
I wasn't even 13 yet. I was not allowed to watch it. I would not have been allowed to watch it. But what it did do for me was that straight people had to listen to the kiss and listened to discussions about the kiss before I came out.
Mhm.
So at least it did do the preparatory work for me. That's what its function was. Even though it is for straight people, it's also for them to see my life as something palatable, something discuss worthy.
Something that they see on TV every whatever night of the week the show came on. I mean, how often did that kind of thing happen for a lot of America prior to that? Will and Grace was a sitcom on NBC that starred Eric McCormick as Will and Deborah Messing as Grace, his straight best friend and eventual on again, off again roommate. The supporting cast is rounded out by the beautiful and lovely Megan Mullally playing Karen. If you watch the show for nothing else, watch it for Megan Mullally. The other supporting character for the show was Jack, played by Sean Hayes. Now, Jack's portrayal is very stereotypical, very flamboyant, very the birdcage compared to Will. Will is more. If Jack and Will were the odd couple, Will would be the straight man to the goofy sidekick character that is Jack. And ironically, though Sean wasn't out at the time, they are portrayed by a straight man and a gay man, respectively.
You're absolutely right, though. Watching it just for Megan and for Sean, that's the relationship that if I wanted anything from that, that was what I wanted to have.
To have a wealthy woman
Not
who loves gay people.
just two people that are happy.
Yes.
Comparatively, those two are happy even when things aren't going well. They're just jokes. They're just puppets all the time. Not puppets, but they are hilarious. They are not serious people.
Well, yeah, and even when, yeah, you said this already, but even when things get serious, they don't. And that's the sitcom element of it, but it is nice to have that.
Still, as a kid that doesn't know anything, that's what I would prefer to have compared to Will and Grace, who are always unhappy and making sly, jokey pop reference remarks all the time. They're witty as hell. All the characters are very witty. The difference is that I felt Megan and Sean's characters had fun.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, like you said, we were 13 at the time, so certainly they didn't emulate any sort of life that we lived. And I think in that same regard, for a lot of people in the Midwest, New York, whether or not it's real New York or fictional New York, is this place where, and still is this place where all of these more extreme liberal, free-minded things can happen, and that doesn't necessarily reflect where we were living at the time, where we currently live.
We're not going to say where we live, but it's essentially Kansas to Oz. Like, the Emerald City is New York City for me.
Yeah.
It's fancy. There's Broadway. There's probably dancers on the streets. Whatever is going on over there, it's fictional to me. Even now that you say it, I recognize that I have an idea of what New York is, and it's very much for travel purposes, not for living. But yeah, we were kids. There was nothing in that life, nothing on that television screen that really interested me. And what's most poignant to me is that it wasn't about a gay man's relationship or seeking a relationship with another man. It was about a man looking for a relationship with this woman, and this woman also looking for this relationship with this man. It was not what gay characters would probably pursue today.
In the episode Acting Out, which was the 13th episode of season 2, the characters on the show are excited about a fictional kiss that is supposed to happen between two gay male characters on a show that they watch on primetime TV. So that's kind of the setting for the events of the show. It makes it real meta. We see them walking down New York, and Jack runs up to Will and Grace and says they have to cancel their plans because this is the biggest event that will ever happen. When they're sitting on the chair in the room getting ready to watch it, Will makes a joke about it being one large step for man on mankind. So they are watching the show, and as the romantic kiss is about to happen, the characters are watching it happen. Grace utters, "Gay sex is so hot," which is gross. I
And
don't
also, they've telegraphed that no gay sex is happening. It's just two men talking to each other.
Yeah, like where I don't that moment took me out of it personally. I want okay,
That
but
moment brought me in.
you really felt it.
Well, because that's what I was looking for. She's
Mhm.
speaking to my heart. Two guys coming up on one another. It's supposed to be gay sex. That's
Yeah. Ultimately, the show that they're watching does not feature the kiss. When the characters go to kiss, it pans away.
they're upset. The rest of the episode is about them tracking down who's responsible for it and getting an answer, and no answer, no happy answers found until on their way back, trying to figure out if they're going to accept defeat. Jack and Will catch Al Roker doing the morning show as their happy everyday weatherman. They pull his cameras aside while he's doing interviews, and Jack grabs Al's mic and they talk about what he was expecting and how it's not over. And Al Roker just dismisses it as, sometimes a kiss, even when it isn't, just is, or something to that effect. Super sweet line to be dismissive from Al Roker. Then Will, having a great idea, decides to grab Jack's face and kiss him. And it is a lip viewable kiss. But it's not for any romance sake. It's not for any
Yeah.
purpose other than to be political, to get out of the way, to realize, hey, I have this platform. I'm going to use it, not just to be mad, but to make progress.
Which is even more meta. Like, we're not going to make this moment about romance. As the show, the first kiss doesn't have to have this tension. It just is part of the sitcom vibe, and it happened.
By sitcom vibe, you mean it's over. Once it's over,
Yeah,
there's no.
it's a laugh moment, and it's not. Yeah, it's absolutely a laugh moment. He pulls it in. There's laugh. They cut away to other people reacting to it, which are parts of the bit of the episode as well. Grace was trying to get out of a relationship and say that she was in love with Will, and she responds like, "There's the love of my life, kissing a guy on national television," and was it Will's boss or somebody in Will's
Yes.
office. Somebody in Will's office says something like, "Not boyfriend my ass," when they see it on TV. So they're able to pull away from the moment very quickly, and it doesn't mean anything. I don't want to say it doesn't mean anything to the characters, because I think it would be a very big moment.
Next episode, it doesn't. That very episode,
Yeah,
Jack and Will make a point of like, this wasn't a thing. It would be a thing for you, but it's not for me. It's gonna like end my relationships. Like they talk briefly about the drama that will ensue in their lives, but the camera never covers it. It's not part of a series. It is just one situation comedy, just
yeah.
one point in a big tapestry of not going anywhere, because that's what it is.
Yeah, that's most of the things, right? There are a few running bits and a few overarching story moments for the show,
But it's not a kiss.
but it's certainly not that kiss or either one of their desires to be activists for cultural representation of the queer community. That's not a thing that we
If it had any impact in my life, it would be that my romance is separate from my activism, which is an interesting element that I don't think other people had to grow up with before that. Their romance, their life, their personal life was very much political, to fight for marriage, to fight for representation. It was based on their relationship. And thank you, Will and Grace, for giving me the freedom to not be in a relationship and still be an activist.
You're talking about now, though.
I'm talking about now, but you know, we did go into activism as college kids. I personally I didn't sense that I had to use my personal relationships to make a stand. Like there were personal relationships that was for my private life. It really was.
As I listened to Alex talk and listened to how the show would have impacted my life closer to when this episode aired, I absolutely feel like my relationships were political and therefore part of my activism. And I would love to think that I would have been a very, very, very awesome ally. I don't know. I have no way to prove that. So yeah, no, I'm gonna disagree with you on that part of the impact. I think in terms of probably not this kiss specifically, but Will and Grace in general, just because it was, it was the gay show. I don't want to say virtue signaling, but if somebody did mention that they watched Will and Grace, you were like, okay, maybe I can hang with you. Not for me personally as much of a safe place as somebody saying I watch Buffy the Vampire Slayer, but we'll get into that later on in this podcast.
I think the show did offer relationships that I wouldn't have had access to because another high school female had watched Will and Grace or had become more comfortable with homosexuals because of Will and Grace. I was more able to navigate the high school scene once I came out and got in touch with who I was. The allyship was much larger than perhaps it would have been in middle school. But then again, like I can't go back in time and retry. I cannot prove any of these things.
Yeah, absolutely.
I do remember, you know,
the positive or the negative. We don't know what the world would have been like without Jack McPharland.
I do remember a conversation in the car with Tracy on the way back from her cheerleading practice. I was the mascot at the time, and I did not see the connection that a mascot was also a cheerleader. Another story for another time. But we were in the car trying to figure out which gay hag couple we were. And I wasn't exactly a Jack, but, you know, she was a pretty great Karen.
That's very endearing. That's what I'll say to that. In rediscovering this episode, rewatching it, we also kind of revisited Sean Hayes, and rediscovering the show and watching it, we also revisited Sean Hayes.
Say it again, but not so upset.
When we were revisiting Will and Grace, we had to revisit Sean Hayes and his coming out story.
That coming out story, so I have to preface this with, we're talking about topics and part of our history. Whether I like it now or whether I like it in the future is second to understanding that it is part of our history. It needs to be preserved. It needs to be respected. Sean Hayes has my respect. Over the course of time, that respect has grown. But at the time, I was flipping angry for him to play a flamboyant homosexual and be straight. Because that was, Jack McFarland is only a shadow or like a pairing for Will to make Will seem a certain way and Jack to look the opposite. It was still part of the parentheses or brackets where I had to put my life as I figured out what my identity is, who it can be in the social world. That was one of the main references. And for him to be straight sucked. And then for him to come out much, much later, not necessarily taking ownership for the character that he was playing, the parody of a homosexual. Because I only call it a parody of the homosexual because I don't know who he is in comparison to the character he is playing. And that's true and fair of all actors. They're all playing a character. Some actors are better than others, though. I have seen some people who really only, I don't know how to say this phrase, they play a few swatches away from who they are. And some people have depth and range. Maybe that's all camera. I don't know about the movie.
I never believed, even for a second, and remember arguing with people that would be like, no, he's not gay. He would say it if he's gay. He obviously loves gay people. Why wouldn't he just come out and say he was gay? I was like, he's gay. He's just in the closet. And I was and these arguments would be occurring during like the later years of the season when I was, an older teen, either on the verge of coming out myself or just barely out and very angry at people who weren't out, or not necessarily angry, but some type of animosity or, wanting that connection, that idol. And I never would wrap my head around Sean Hayes being anything but Jack. And, unfortunately for his career, that's probably pigeonholed him for a very long time to playing certain things or playing nothing. And that is unfortunate. And as an adult, I very much, looking back on this, I don't want anybody to feel pressured to come out. I really, really struggle when we pressure on very young actors to express their sexuality in any way because sexuality can be evolving. And if you come out of something, everybody's looking at you. I mean, you might have felt 100% that that was your identity in that moment when you were 19. And then, 3 months later are a little bit more gray. So, yeah, I never believed I never believed Sean Hayes was straight. I don't know if I just personally, didn't want to. Of course, there was probably some of that, but I do remember having some arguments where people were like, "Oh, you never said." I was like, "I don't care." For the record, my gaydar is not 100. There are lots of people that I'm like, "Nah, that person's gay," and they were not gay. But I will give myself a long distance pat on the back for reading Sean's gaydar through the TV at a very young age.
I don't hate Sean Hayes. I don't need to tell you that. Over time, I came to realize, like, it's complicated. He's allowed to come out when he's ready to come out.
Mm.
He did not need to come out for me. And he certainly didn't sign up for that show to come out. That wasn't a vehicle for him to come out. That was a career vehicle for him.
Mm-hmm.
It took a lot of maturity. I'm still growing in my maturity, and I will come to understand better in time. But for now, I understand that this was career for him. This was money for him. This was an opportunity to get his name and face out there so that he could perform his art. He got stuck in it for several seasons and eventually did come back to play it again second time around. I also understand, like, he was there for straight people to understand that homosexuals aren't bad, aren't the worst, and are not ill-meaning. Even though he was the more liberal of the two, we never saw Jack. He hasn't done any of the real things that I see real gay friends do. The jokes, the comedy, it's all still there. The comedy situations that he and Karen were in, Jack and Karen, where they make fun of others, they laugh it off, they make fun of themselves, they laugh it off, they make fun of each other, they laugh it off. I still see that running in relationships that I have now, but relationships that I have now also don't have some of the naughty bits that come with a non-sitcom life. Talking about the specifics of who you slept with and the specifics of how that affected my life and the specifics of how deeply it hurt or aroused or interested or vexed me.
Yeah, I mean, in a lot of ways, because he was a caricature, Jack was more free than a lot of characters are allowed to be on TV even.
In addition to that, he was self-hating. He was self-hating enough. Both of the queer characters, gay male characters, despised their weight, were interested in looking fit, looking young, teasing each other for not looking young or getting big. And that was big for the age.
That is one thing that definitely caught me off guard when watching the rewatch, and not so surprising because that was the setting of the late 90s, early 2000s. Lots of body shaming jokes between the two very fit gay male characters, and between Karen and Grace as well. Between Karen and Grace, as in Karen towards Grace.
Grace right back sometimes,
Yeah.
calling her an old hag or old junkie or whatever.
Yeah, and that's a relic of a bygone era that is not as prevalent in pop culture. Pop culture is a lot. I don't want to say pop culture is always more kind because it's not, but I do think there is an awareness, particularly in art that has come out in the last 3 to 4 years, of not only body positivity, but being aware that when these characters say words, they're not just affecting the character that they're saying it to, they're affecting the actor and the audience.
That's beautiful. Yeah. I never thought about it that way. I would say that those sharp discussions about body type, about what you're wearing, because self-image was still a big deal.
It's still part of the culture.
Still part of the culture. Yeah. So in this series, if you rewatch it again, you'll also hear them talking about just dressing poorly or not dressing appropriately or not dressing as nicely as they could. And that conversation still occurs even in the Midwest, being salty or spilling tea or whatever you want to do to make a joke on one another or make a joke on ourselves. It still happens in private. And I don't know I cannot say that self-hatred is only due to Will and Grace, but it definitely modeled that behavior is appropriate between friends.
Mm.
And I sound like such a conservative Midwestern wholesome dude. I'm not, but it definitely didn't challenge that framework. I don't know if my relationships improved because of Will and Grace, but I know that at least my office and professional relationships aren't obscure or bizarre or strained. And I don't feel challenged to hide my homosexuality.
Would it have been any different if Sean Hayes had been out? Do you think the impact of the show would have been affected? Do you think your feelings towards the show would have changed for you personally?
Yeah, I don't think that show would have changed my life any differently, whether or not Sean Hayes had come out or had a reason to come out. I think a show would have done it anyways. Another show would have done it.
In the worst case scenario in which Sean Hayes comes out and it somehow unfortunately tanks the show, you think culture would have gotten there anyways? Or you think that eventually a gay male lead playing a gay male character in a sitcom would have happened anyways? Because that does eventually happen.
I think it would have eventually happened. The road was already going there. A lot of shows were thinking about it or introducing gay characters in more serious ways. Jack McPhee.
Like Jack McPhee, about 3 months after the non-passionate advocate kiss that Will and Jack share in front of Al Roker, a character from Dawson's Creek named Jack McPhee has a romantic kiss with another gay character.
Dawson's Creek is about a bunch of teenage kids in a small town who just try to have fun sex.
Read the description.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Okay.
So, state your source. Is it according to Wikipedia or according to...
We'll see if it even comes up. I'm going to need the date as well to do it true to form. Fanboy time. Oh, it's this week. Come down, Wi-Fi. I'll just start this. On Saturday, February 24th at about 1 o'clock, I Googled Dawson's Creek just to verify what year it was. And I've had a really funny introduction about what the show is about. The drama series chronicles the lives of wannabe filmmaker Dawson Leary, his best friend Joey, parentheses female, who has been in love with him since childhood, close friend and slacker Pacey, and new girl next door Jen. Additional friends come and go, feelings change, and Dawson must suffer through growing pains. Those additional new friends come second season.
Yeah, or at least the additional new friends that are important to us to talk about are Andy, female in parentheses,
Damn.
and Jack McPhee, who are siblings, twins. Are they twins?
Yeah, I think they are.
Who are twins?
I need to verify that. I don't
No,
think they
that's
are.
okay. It doesn't matter. We don't need to. That's not super important right now. Who are maybe twins.
Who are maybe twins.
Who are siblings that enroll at the same school as the main cast. And Jack McPhee comes out via poetry inadvertently in the later half of the second season.
All right. So the setting is small town in the Northeast. Dawson is this well-to-do kid with very successful family, very successful parents. He's affluent, even though he's in a small town. And he sees himself as just a cut above the rest. He wants to make big dreams of himself. And he involves himself in all these small social dramas to forward his career, to forward his message, to forward his story, specifically with Joey, in parentheses, the female. When Andy and Jack come to join the school, he is all about pushing Pacey and Andy together because that'll make more room for him and Joey. It's this whole triangle thing where Pacey's sort of interested in Joey, but what if there was this other girl? And so Dawson uses his influence I watched this show way more because I knew there was a gay kid.
Mm-hmm.
I needed to get to that part.
We'll talk about that later.
Jack comes into the story. I most remember in the poem story.
Jack was initially introduced as a show. And was a love interest for Joey as well. But that very quickly became to be kind of like I don't want to say like a bait and switch. It evolved and we learned more about him. And the biggest way that we learned about him was his coming out moment through this poem that he read.
Pacey and Jack are classmates. Pacey is more of a rough and tumble kind of guy. He's confrontational. He's not aggressive, but he is willing to be, and attempts to come to the defense of Jack when he is being bullied by his teacher into sharing a poem
Yes.
that he wasn't ready to share.
Yeah, and it's important. Nobody in the class was expected to read their poems out loud. The teacher had already obviously read the poems and was specifically forcing Jack into this moment of reading this poem out loud. And I'm going to make Alex read it for you.
Today was a day the world got smaller, darker. I grew more afraid, not of what I am, but what I could be. I loosen my collar to take a breath. My eyes fade. And I see him, the image of perfection. His frame strong, his lips smooth. I keep thinking, what am I so scared of? I wish I could escape the pain, but these thoughts, they invade my head. Bound to my memory, they're like shackles of guilt. God, please set me free. Free from the pain and this guilt, so that I may face tomorrow, today. Now in the show, he cuts out a God, please set me free.
And he had started crying even before he gets to the description of the lips and the body of the man. He's starting to tear up, and he runs from the classroom, and Pacey follows him. He eventually comes out, though not right away. He has a lot of reluctancy. There's an argument with his dad. That's not when the kiss happens, because obviously he doesn't kiss Pacey. What a world that would be.
Pacey would have done it.
Oh, Pacey. Yeah, no, this is not a Pacey Witter appreciation pod.
He deserves one.
I didn't rewatch every episode between the coming out episode and the kiss because I had watched it growing up. I believe I watched it when it aired on the glorious WB network because that was my jam as a 13-year-old. So yeah, fast forward to May of 2000 and the penultimate episode of the third season of Dawson's Creek, titled The Anti-Prom. Jack is attempting to buy tickets to the prom for himself and his date, Ethan, and he is turned down for the prom by a character whose name was so, obviously this was a character that somebody that wrote the episode hated in the 60s because her name was Barbara, and I don't remember going to school with a Barbara. I don't think that was a... Do you remember a single Barbara?
No.
I don't think that's a name. That'd be like a show now having a Brittany or Ashley or Courtney as, as the villains.
Denise.
So he's buying tickets, and the person in charge of selling them, Barbara, is horrendous to him. Says some very strange things about... I think the line that I remember the most is what are you going to do? Dance stubbly cheek to stubbly cheek?
Which was, I thought was a great line because it's oh, there are options. At the time, I did not have stubbly cheeks. So that gay man who wrote that line understood the double-sided.
That gay man, Greg Berlanti. We'll talk more about him in a bit. So Jack storms out. He goes to talk to his sister and his ex-girlfriend, good friend, Joey, about the event. And that scene was very interesting to me for two reasons. One was that he says, why can't things I do just be normal? Why can't I go to prom just like everyone else? Why does everything I do have to be political? That's not an exact quote, but it's along those lines. And in response, his sister says,
it's just the way it is right now.
Yeah.
It'll change one day, but that's just how things are. I remember because it's the phrase that glue sticks me into my seat sometimes. It's that sort of sentiment of just be patient. And now that my hormones aren't rallying against the walls, now that I'm an adult, I still have that message in my head. That's just the way things are right now. Maybe things will be better one day, but this is just the way it is. Boo Andy. She never became a real thing.
Yeah. And well, it's
Andy didn't. I don't even think she comes back.
she like has like a nervous breakdown or something. The way that they destroy that character in order to make room for Pacey and Joey, that's not what this podcast is about. Is not good. But yeah, uh, Jack Jack is a very 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 sweet guy, and in that moment he's like, well, I'm just not gonna go. And then Dawson Leary has one of his famous I can't lose my magic movie moment in my head ideas. And so if Joey and Jack, mostly Joey, are not going to go to this prom, then how about I propose an anti-prom? And so
Joey will still go.
so that Joey will still go because ultimately that's his goal. This is also not an anti-Dawson Leary podcast.
But it should be. No, I like Dawson's Creek a lot. I did like that show a lot.
So they go to the dance together, and Ethan reveals that he'd also never been to a dance with a boy, and Jack was mad because he feels duped into it. Ethan leaves, runs off, and then they meet up at the train station, some type of bus station, because he's going back to college. They meet up at some place because they meet up at some commuter venue because Ethan is going back to college, and
I know what scene you're talking about now.
yeah, and Ethan asks, basically, in a way, dares Jack to kiss him, like, and in Dawson's Creek, Kevin Williamson inspired, very meta moment. Ethan says to Jack, "There's no cameras to cut away. It's just me and you. What do you want to do?" And Jack freezes, does nothing, and Ethan gets on the train and goes back to college.
If I can backtrack a little bit, Jack expresses at some earlier episode his angst about finding a relationship and how difficult it is. And he says it in like vague terms that resonated with me at the moment, understanding like it is hard, all this pressure to find the right guy to start this stuff out with. And he eventually finds Ethan and thinks because Ethan is older and has been through these things that Ethan can play the guide. And that's definitely how Ethan impresses himself on Jack's life, is all these philosophical notions of coming out the right way, taking your time and doing all these moments so that you can like progress intellectually, spiritually, physically, emotionally into a perfect homosexual man. They kept on using the phrase self-actualization. Yeah. But
sorry, I totally forgot that. And then you said it and I was like, oh yeah.
And you know, at that time as a kid, I didn't know what these words meant. Being an adult, I understand what Ethan's trying to do. You've probably even been Ethan a couple of times, more often than I want to be.
Even though the characters were only 3 years older than we were supposed to be, or maybe 4 years older, they taught, as was typical of early 2000s teenage shows.
Precocious.
They were very intellectual.
Witty.
Yes. So yes, self-actualization was a word that they used multiple times.
Because there was this pressure of being a perfect gay. And I like that. That really did hit a chord with me, of trying to be palatable for others, as well as happy at the same. So Jack and Ethan have this pressure in the relationship already. Ethan feeling the pressure to be a good homosexual representation for young Jack. And Jack trying to step into those footsteps, trying to follow in the footsteps of being a good homosexual. It just turns out Jack realizes that he's had all this pressure all for nothing, that Ethan isn't about all these big strides in this big life. And
he's never taken a boy to the prom. This is also his first time going with a male date to the prom.
And being older, I definitely see how that fits for me in my life. Then it was just like this hand to forehead moment where I'm just shocked and feel hurt and surprised and don't know what to do. I'm very much in the moment with Jack and this surprise and trying to figure out how to handle this betrayal. Like, can you still have a kiss? Can it still be that important? He doesn't know what he's doing either. Shouldn't someone in this relationship know what's going on? A lot of questions that I definitely didn't have all by my lonesome in middle school and high school. It was interesting to share that moment with Jack as a kiddo.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about the kiss that eventually happens?
You can, yeah. So the following episode is titled True Love, and Jack has significantly less screen time than all of the other characters. That's something that continues to happen for him, unfortunately, in Dawson's Creek. As all of these love stories wrap up, each we do get to see a conclusion of his relationship with Ethan. He and his friend Jen drive to the college that Ethan is attending, and he finds him in some type of open grass area sitting on a picnic table talking to another boy and runs out of the car and runs up to him.
He does this big old speech of how he understands things better now and how he wants to do the right thing, etc., blah, 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 make a big romantic overture. And he does kiss him. And then Ethan pulls away and explains that, hey, man, this is a guy. And he says him by name. I can't remember his name now, but
Brad,
this is Brad. And Jack is like, Brad? Ex-boyfriend Brad? And Brad stands up, current boyfriend Brad.
Yeah.
Doesn't walk away, doesn't storm away. Very much not the queen moment that I have seen in the past or have played part in a high school drama or a college drama or any other drama after that time.
Yeah. Much like the language that these children speak, Brad seems very evolved beyond his years when his boyfriend is kissed by another boy right in front of him. He's just like, gives them room to talk it out. So Ethan doesn't work out for Jack. He does have a love story, though. This is my plug for you to watch it. If you don't know it, watch the whole show just for Jack's love story. Watch Dawson's Creek. It has some fun moments, and Jack's love story is very sweet. So, okay, that's good. Okay. One name that I don't think I remembered instantly being associated with Dawson's Creek. When I hear Dawson's Creek, I think Kevin Williamson. He created the show. He also wrote Scream. He came out much later in life. He was a name that I knew at the time. When I saw his name, I was like, that's the dude that wrote Scream. He writes all of these wordy things. I appreciated Kevin Williamson's work even at 13, 14, younger probably. I watched horror movies very young and was very into them, and I blame Kevin Williamson for that. But one name that has in my later life become more of a household name is Greg Berlanti. And in reading interviews with Kerr and rewatching the episode, Greg Berlanti wrote this episode and pretty much steered the ship of the story for Jack. So if you don't know the name Greg Berlanti, after who was it? Grace. If you don't know the name Greg Berlanti, after writing Jack McPhee, he goes on to produce and be parts of a lot of other CW shows and shows not on CW. He wrote and created the show Brothers and Sisters, which was an adult drama starring Callista Flockhart, Rob Lowe, and had a gay couple. And that show had a gay couple in it, and it was very well written. And my wife and I watched that pretty regularly when it was on. And then, of course, there's the Arrowverse. The WB no longer exists, but in its place is the CW, and Greg Berlanti has cemented himself in creating television shows, and those shows all have queer representation.
Thanks, Greg.
Yeah. So yeah, that's it. Just a little appreciation for Greg Berlanti and the work that he did then and now. An hour. That's pretty crazy.
That means 20 minutes of usable material. Just kidding.
I mean, probably like half an hour. I think this is a lot more flowy than but I'm a cheerleader flowed. It just flew everywhere. I did have some on that slide. I did have a couple wrap up. Oh, and I think we've already kind of said this. Maybe it's because we were kids at the time, but I'll ask you this question. Who's more important to you? Jack McFarland or Jack McPhee?
Definitely Jack McPhee. Even though he was played by a straight dude, he was played very sweetly by that man. The character itself is more important to me than the character of Jack McFarland. I want to say that it's easy to pin Kerr Smith's gay representation in television as being perfect and ideal because it is played by a straight person. It's a very masculine portrayal, if occasionally soft, if occasionally emotional. He's only soft and emotional in comparison to Dawson, and no, scratch that line. Dawson's a big emotional.
James Vanderbeek and the famous crying face. No, Jack is not softer or more emotional than Dawson, but certainly compared to Pacey.
Certainly compared to Pacey.
but
Pacey
not
would rather
not
fight.
but the sweetness. Jack gets the sweetness of Pacey with the emotions of Dawson.
It's true.
Jack is a highlight of those two things.
Thinking back, Jack McPhee plays a easier role to fill in life. If these actors are not just characters, but things to aspire to be, Kerr Smith plays the better role just because he doesn't air out his own dirty laundry all the time. Jack McFarland's character is probably the more honest character. He is more open about his sexuality, more free to share what he's thinking than Kerr Smith's character. For that, I understand that it's liberating. I will always feel comfortable sharing way too much because, in part, I've had a big queen in the 90s do that for me.
RuPaul?
Another episode.
I think it changes. I know at the time. I mean, I've already said it. I was a WB kid. Live and died by primetime WB. WB was life. Jack was very important to me and very confusing. Like, I remember watching the coming out episode and him reading the poem and being like, that's not necessarily gay. The man in the mirror is just who he wants to be for himself. It's not about a partner. Why does everybody keep asking him that over the course of the next two episodes? And then he eventually does come out, and I'm like, well, what does this mean? And I had to, do some thinking on that. And I didn't come out till a couple years, 3 years after that. So I definitely think it was important. I think the continued love story that we see unfold throughout the course of the WB for Jack meant more to me than Will or Grace's relationship. That's fact too. The love story that unfolds for Jack McPhee is more important to me than the love stories that unfold for Jack McFarland or Will Truman. And some of that is just they were teenagers and the other two were adults. As an adult now and kind of just knowing the legacy and kind of like looking back on the people in my adult life that have referenced just Jack or have referenced Karen or have said that they watched Will and Grace, that number is so much higher than the people who that number is so much higher than the people who occasionally reference Dawson's Creek outside of me and Alex, who continue to reference Dawson's Creek to each other.
So many times this week. It's unbelievable.
But yeah, so I think both of these characters are very important. I think both of these characters are very important. And I think when we look at queer pop culture, I think it is the 2000s are a huge turning point. Were they 100% what we would have wanted or 100% what we would have needed? I don't know, but I know that they gave me courage and other things that we talk about that will happen other events that happened in the 2000s that we'll talk about in this podcast shaped who I am. And that's why we're exploring these things.
For sure. It could have been anybody, but it was them that did it. And for that, yeah, of course I'm grateful. I used to be a lot more upset about who it was and how it's not representative of me, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But doing this activity with you has shown has shown me that I'm fighting for no reason. I'm just fighting internally that these characters do or don't represent me. The fact is
that's layered too.
They're ambassadors for who I am and who I want to be and the general rights that I would like to live with, the general freedoms.
Blind of race or gender presentation. They do represent two open characters who were living experiences that to some degree we went on to live. Less so for McFarland, but still, yeah, I mean, relatable moments that we would see in our own lives in some way reflected.
And honestly, there's parts of my life where I can look back and be like, I'm glad that I don't feel so strange because Jack McFarland did it first. Running on the treadmill so that I can feel fit, even though I'm technically skinny. The idea of that did not happen because Will and Grace did it first. This insecurity did not happen first. The insecurity that I have did not originate from Will and Grace's comic storylines, etc. It's because my life is exactly that. There are pressures, and I feel less strange. I feel less alien because there is someone that talked about it. There is some representation that I can rely on. I don't have a whole queer family that's all around me, like Seventh Heaven, like pointing me to the book of Jesus Christ or what our family values are. I know I'm opening this other bubble.
What?
I just mean like there's no insulated non-sexual culture of people around me to let me know that my thoughts, my ideas, my fears are okay or not okay.
Mm.
In the blank space of my head, it's just anxiety and discomfort. But when I have a character like Jack McPharland that I can look back on and realize
Yeah.
I had the same
Especially when
thoughts.
you're like putting yourself back in the mindset of the 13 or younger, or the 13 or something year old teenager that was watching these shows. I mean, yeah, I didn't have any queer people in my real life at that time. I didn't know a single queer person.
Right.
So yeah, I think that is these characters do become our lifeline to community. And as I mentioned earlier, they become these moments where we can screen other people by talking about whether or not they enjoy the shows and what they like about the shows. And yeah.
I think I'm touching on the fact that it's validating now that I am a 30-something homosexual single man. I can look back at that character and I have a historical reference point to say that my thoughts today aren't strange, alien, or absolutely unhealthy, that they exist and continue in my history. My personal life is part of a general human experience, and it's not strange. It's not alien.
Mm-hmm.
Even though this happened 20 years ago, almost.
Longer than that.
Longer than that.
Look, the kisses we talked about we're coming up on 24 years.
24 years.
The kisses that we talked about are 24 years old.
Yeah.
Which is amazing, really. I like to think about that out loud. Like, yeah, it is fascinating to have seen the evolution of queer TV. Even though when I'm watching these beautiful, perfect little queer love stories where all of these people have queer friends and their straight friends are super, super accepting.
Or else,
yes. I do like have those moments where I'm like, why didn't I have Heartstoppers? That's, yeah.
Or Santana and Brittany, as dark as that one was.
Fuck Glee. No, I'm not a fan of Glee.
Big fan of Glee.
Okay, I mean,
it's gonna be a contentious episode. I love
we're
it.
gonna have to talk about. Well, Glee didn't even air until like 2008, 2009. It's like barely even. It's not Gay2k.
It's not.
I mean, we can discuss it, but it's not really the same culture.
I was talking about without the mic.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, I was talking about with the mic.
This whole part's going to be deleted because we totally lost the
ending. I think we gave a good ending. I was just adding.
Yeah, let's
retrospect.
Actually wrap it up. Thank you. Thank you for joining us on our exploration of the two Jacks. Thank you for joining us on our exploration of the two Jacks. We hope you enjoyed it. We enjoyed it. We plan to do this a lot more often, and we plan to share it with you. If you have any ideas or thoughts for things that you'd like to hear us talk about on the pod, you can reach us at gay2kpod@gmail.com.
Should I also give a closing? No. Okay.
You could say thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. I appreciate that you've joined these friends and that you are becoming our friends on the pod. We'll be talking about more queer turn-of-the-century history in a podcast here soon. Bye.
Okay, let's combine those.
I don't know what I said.
No, I like it. I think I like what you said about we'll be exploring more queer history. And I like what I said about if you have any topics. So you started off, and then I'll thank you for joining.
Hey guys, thank you for joining these two friends and becoming our friends as we discuss and explore queer turn-of-the-century history with you.
If you have any ideas of topics that you'd like to hear us explore, feel free to drop us an email at gay2k@gmail.com. Please feel free to drop us an email at gay2k, that's the number 2, gay2k@gmail.com. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. We'll be
Signing off.
Thank you, and join us next time for
Gay2k. Woo. Awkward.